Hey everyone, in this video we will draw this and I want to show you how you can use shapes and guidelines to get accurate proportions in your sketch. Once you learn and practice this, you will be able to sketch anything with the correct proportions and angles. If you also want to improve, it's time to start with learning the basics. My upcoming course, Learn How to Draw Basic Drawing Techniques, is open to join soon. If you sign up for the waitlist now, you can get a special discount and all the details once we open. The link to sign up is under the video. So I'd like to show you how you can easily use shapes so that you can measure that, and then also on your drawing paper. So I just drew an outline around both the flower and the butterfly. And now you can see that, for example, if you measure this shape, so this is like almost a triangle, and then divide it in half. If you start by drawing those guidelines, measuring those guidelines, and making sure you have the correct size as in the reference photo, then you know that when you're going to draw the butterfly in this triangle and the flower in this triangle, then you know you will have the correct proportions. And it's also best when you outline to start with straight lines. So let's start with this triangle. So the first guidelines are a bit rough. Make sure that they are light. Remember, you will need to erase them later on. So you want to make sure that this shape is the correct size, because if you don't measure this and you continue to move on to the rest, then you will notice that somewhere you went wrong. So if you start wrong and you continue, then it could be off. Now let's look at this one, and you can look at the angle. It can be tricky to draw the exact same angles. So what I do is I try it first, and then you can double check. Let's double check that by measuring this. Okay, so now you have these two triangles. One is for the butterfly and one is for the flower. Now we can start looking at the smaller shapes. And for the flower, for example, if you look at this shape and you divide it in half, you can see that the stem starts like around there. So if I have the middle here, then we can draw the stem. And remember that with a flower, things in nature, the butterfly, try to not draw these straight lines, but more loose lines. And then you can measure just to check. Again, with a flower, you don't have to be too accurate, but just to be sure, if you're getting it right, you can double check if you like. Try to keep on comparing. In these videos, I just want to focus on the sketching and go with you step by step how to sketch this and how to get the right proportion. So now you can look at half. It's a bit higher than half. Or you can go from this point, like up, like around here. Now if you remove the guidelines and you erase these ones a bit, and now you look at your drawing, you should have the correct proportions. And then you can move on to more detail, fill in the smaller areas, because now you have the bigger shapes. So I'm going to go over the flower and the butterfly and define it a bit more, make it a bit more visible to see. So you see that the shadow up here is causing a bit of a cast shadow on the petal below it, and on this side as well. If I define the sketch a bit more, I like to pay attention to where the shadows are and then draw that part a bit darker, or fill that in a bit. What you can do is think about light and darks, just like with value. Let me show you an example. So you can use line weight. You can, I know I always say that you need to use light pressure when shading, but with sketching and just using one pencil, you can like have light lines, like this one, midtones, and then for the shadow, you can go a bit more over it. So I don't really press hard, but I go over it a few times. So you see that this could be like really light, midtone, and shadow. That's how you can use line weight or thicker lines, so you can thicken this a bit more to make it more darker. Keep that bit light for the highlight, and then the midtone you can also go a bit over it. Or if something is really light, you don't even have to draw the whole line, but you can like break it up a bit. So if you have a line here, you don't have to connect it and completely close the line, because then you can imagine light falling on that line and your mind will connect that line, but because light is falling on that line, you won't see the whole line. I hope you understand what I mean. So when you're drawing like the lighter areas, you can like break up the lines a bit. And then again, for like the midtones, you can go a bit over it. And then for the shadows, you can fill it in a bit more, a bit darker. Practice that a bit, just to define the sketch a bit more, make it look a bit realistic without adding all of the shading. And you don't have to, you just can draw this sketch like just the outline and practice the sketching and getting the proportions right, and then you can start the shading if that's what you prefer. And again, if you prefer a more realistic look and want to shade this, then you can practice shading on this on the sketch. I sometimes like to keep drawings like keep them in a sketched way. I think that's also kind of interesting. So whatever you choose for reference, you can practice this some more with any reference you prefer to draw. Start with the outline, like the biggest shape, what do you see? And then start looking at the smaller shapes. So when you draw the first biggest shape, try to double check if you have the proportions correct, because otherwise if you start with the wrong proportions, then the rest will all not be right. And then you continue, and then you step away and you look at your drawing and you think, hey, something is off. Why doesn't it look right? Where did I go wrong? So maybe you started with the wrong proportion of the biggest shape, and then you need to start over or do some erasing. So the details are the less important. The biggest shape is the most important, and then continue with the smaller shapes. But the really, really small shapes, like all of these shapes here inside of the wing, those are the least important. So sometimes I see some like beginner artists, they want to draw this butterfly and they start just by drawing the wings, and they focus on all of these small details, and they do actually a pretty good job with drawing all of the small details. But then if you look at the butterfly as a whole, then like this is just an example, then like the upper wing is too small in comparison to the lower wing. So the overall, the bigger shape isn't correct, but all of those small details, they did a really good job with drawing those. But the biggest shape they drew, it wasn't correct. So then if you look at the drawing, you see, okay, the butterfly is looking good, but it's off a bit. If you focus on all of those small details and you notice later that something is off, that's not really a fun thing. So if you would start with the biggest shape and you make sure that you have that one right, then you can continue with the rest. It really helps if you practice your eye to train your eye to see and look for the biggest shapes, draw those biggest shapes first and then the rest. I hope that helps you to see that way too. Look at any reference photo, look for the outline, and that's how we're going to slowly continue to sketch more and more until we start sketching more complex reference photos like portraits. And if you have practiced drawing portraits, you might agree with me that it can be very complicated, because if you get like one single part in the eye, like if it's a bit off or like the mouth is a bit crooked, then the whole portrait will look off and it won't even look like the person in the reference photo. Every small detail matters in that case. So if you're really determined, if you have a goal to draw accurate portraits, draw more like figure drawing, if you're wanting to draw more accurate or more complex things, don't worry by starting drawing just a simple flower. It's all about practice and training your hand and eye to draw what you see, exactly what you see. So you see that I'm just like a bit roughly sketching in, and the parts that are a bit darker, I'm going over that a bit more. And then where you see that it's lighter, I leave that part light. I go around it. So you can keep on adding detail, as much detail as you like. So if you have any questions or suggestions, I would love to hear them. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you understand a bit more about starting with bigger shapes. This is just a sketch, but you can step away for a moment, see if you're satisfied with how it all looks. Okay, so we start with the HB and the 2B for the rest, but you can also move on to the 4B and dark.